Okay, let's start on time. After all, it's the railway that forced the standardization of time in the 1800s. So, good afternoon, everybody. You're all very welcome to this Engineers Ireland lunchtime lecture in relation to the reopening of the Limerick to Foynes freight railway line. My name is Seamus Lynch, and this lecture is hosted by both the Thomond Region and the Transportation Society of Engineers Ireland. The members enjoy doing prolific work in promoting engineering and supporting colleagues. And we're constantly encouraging members to get involved with Engineers Ireland, and there's space on our local Thomond committee for new members to come along and see what it's all about. Some of us are on the committee for more than 25 years, so hopefully we're doing something right. But great to see so many young engineers getting involved as well. So on to today's event. I'm really delighted to chair today's lunchtime lecture on the Limerick to Foynes rail line. There's huge positivity being generated in the Midwest with the development of the Limerick to Foynes line. And this is reflective of the wider development of rail capital infrastructure. Importantly, from taxpayers' perspective, the delivery of projects by Irish Rail is worthy of study. I chaired a presentation by Paul Hendrick, Director of Capital Investments at Irish Rail, in September 2024. There, Paul outlined Iarnród Éireann's Corporate Climate Action Plan 2023 to 2030. Iarnród Éireann's projections and programme were impressive. And looking today at what's being achieved and is being delivered is truly refreshing in the context of large infrastructure project delivery in Ireland. We have Mike Griffith, a fellow Thomond committee member, managing the Q&A. You're still there, Mike, I think?
Indeed.
Good. Just after the main presentation. So if you could put your question in the Q&A panel under here during the presentation section, then Mike will collate and work on answers at the end of the presentation. That should be at about 1:45, and we'll get things wrapped up before 2. Okay, so that's the end of the housekeeping. I'd like to introduce our speaker, David Vaughan, Programme Manager for Capital Investments, Iarnród Éireann. And David is a chartered engineer with over 25 years' experience in rail infrastructure delivery. David has a degree in civil, structural and environmental engineering from Trinity College Dublin, postgraduate diploma in project management from Trinity, an MBA from DCU, and MSc in railway systems engineering and integration from the University of Birmingham. He's highly experienced infrastructure delivery manager with over 20 years of proven experience at every level of capital project delivery. David has led on cathedral scale projects employing various contracting strategies to ensure satisfactory delivery. This extends to multiple capital development projects across the Irish rail network, including Rosslare Europort, with overall responsibility for developing and agreeing project scopes and budgets, seeking board authority and funding approval, managing and influencing stakeholders, satisfying governance requirements, building and managing project teams, and dealing with all commercial and contractual procurement, planning, and safety management elements of rail projects. So I'll now hand you over to David.
Thank you, Seamus, and good afternoon, everybody. Delighted to be here. As Seamus said, myself and my team manage a portfolio of projects across the Irish Rail network. We're part of the Capital Investments division of Irish Rail, and one of my main projects in recent years is the Foynes line reopening. So I'm delighted to be here to tell you about it. So my agenda for the session is to give you a brief history of the line and why we're reopening it now, the project at a glance, an overview of the scope and delivery, some engineering highlights with lots of photographs, little piece on stakeholder engagement, and then some of the challenges and solutions that we came up with. A brief touch on the benefits and impacts, and looking ahead for the line. I'm going to also cover a small piece on the Adare bypass and the rail overbridges that myself and my team delivered in parallel with the railway project, to enable the bypass scheme to progress at pace. And I'll touch off as well some work we're doing with the Ryder Cup 2027 rail transport plan, and then we'll take some questions at the end. So history-wise, I won't dwell on this because I know we're under some time pressure, but the line itself was built in 1858. It carried bulk freight materials, minerals, coal, oil, zinc, lead. It was a mixed use line, so passenger and freight up to 1963. And then the passenger service ceased. And then the freight business then also ceased in 2001. Now the line always remained under Irish Rail's stewardship. The structures were intact. The corridor itself was very little encroachment. We were commissioned to do a feasibility study into the line reopening back in 2013 by Shannon Foynes Port Company. And then we progressed with preliminary design and planning in 2014, and were then commissioned to carry on with the detailed design stage in 2017. That was, again, spearheaded by Shannon Foynes Port Company, in fairness to them, and co-funded in the latter stages by some European funding. We finished that in 2019, and really there was no funding to progress the project, so it sat on the shelf until in 2022 a funding opportunity arose, and we had to quickly dust it off, update the documents, and progress at pace. So why now? Well, it is a key objective of the Irish Rail freight strategy. We have, well, one of the objectives, without going through it blow by blow, is to either connect or enhance connectivity to all of our main ports, and to grow the market share for rail freight. So this is a key plank of that strategy. It's also a key feature of the Shannon Foynes Port Master Plan 2041. It satisfies several EU national and regional development objectives, including providing part of the EU core network on the North Sea Mediterranean corridor. It's a feature of the Project Ireland 2040 planning framework. It's well regarded and mentioned in the Limerick Shannon Metropolitan Area Transport Strategy, which is a mouthful, but better known as LS-MATS. Also, numerous objectives in the Limerick Development Plan 22 to 28, and then it is also heavily featured in the All Ireland Strategic Rail Review. So, well covered from a strategic context perspective. The project at a glance: it's a 42-kilometre long rail corridor, single track line, and the total investment is 151.5 million, funded by the Department of Transport and the NTA. And the line speed on opening will be 50 miles per hour, with a journey time of approximately 53 minutes from Limerick to Foynes, with there is scope to increase that to 70 miles an hour in due course. Our main contractor is John Sisk and Son. Our main consultant is O'Connor Sutton Cronin. There's 81 structures along the route. This is underbridges, overbridges, and culverts. There were 67 level crossings, including 13 public road level crossings. And we're on target to complete the works and commission the operations ready in Q4 this year. October bank holiday weekend in particular is our commissioning weekend. And we have, when I mentioned about updating the documents in 2022, we increased the spec to make it future-proof for potential passenger services. So just to give you a feel for the corridor itself, this is a busy graphic, but bear with me. So the railway line itself is indicated here in black. The blue dots represent public road level crossings. They were once operated by gatekeepers, now all being updated and upgraded to CCTV type remotely controlled level crossings. The red dots are really like place names, just for people to understand the geography. Now, a number of them were former stations along the corridor, including Patrick's Well, Adare, Ballingran, Askeaton. The light blue line just up in the top right there is, or cyan you might call it, is outside of the scope, but it is the old Mungret spur line. And then also on the top right, you might see what we call the North Kerry Curve, which was the former connection into Limerick Culvert Station. They're not in scope, but for the sake of getting your bearings, I just wanted to leave them on the graphic. So scope and delivery strategy. We split the project into two packages or work streams. The first was, we called it Work Package 1, Track and Civils. This was funded by the Department of Transport. It involved vegetation clearance along the corridor, replacement of the old track with new sleepers and rail on a fresh bed of ballast, rehabilitation of the bridges and culverts, including renewal of Robertstown Viaduct, the signature structure on the route, which I'll come to further. Upgrading the road infrastructure at the level crossings, and then renewal of line-side fencing and drainage. Then work package 2 followed on, and this is where we call it operational readiness, and this is the signalling for the route, including the CCTV level crossings. GSMR train radio, so that's GSM is the technology a lot of us are familiar with for mobile phone network, but there's a version of that which is for railways only, hence the R, and that allows communication between our trains and our control centres. And we were also endeavouring to eliminate accommodation level crossings where practicable. So this is really only by agreement and where cost effective. And in work package 2, we put in our track connections at Limerick and at Foynes Port, and then also at roughly the centre point of the line in Adare. So procurement wise, this is really a mixture of procurement and organisation. My team in Irish Rail looked after project management and track design and some bridge design, and I'll come to that later, and then the safety approvals, both internally and with the Commission for Railway Regulation. And our signalling and CCTV level crossing design was all managed, designed and installed in-house by our signalling, electrical and telecoms department. They looked after the procurement of all their own materials for that. Rail and sleepers, we procured the rail. We have obviously a supply contract for rail, so that was procured very early in the job and delivered to Foynes Port. Sleepers, we normally manufacture sleepers ourselves. We manufacture a lot of sleepers every year, but this project came at us fairly quickly, and we couldn't meet the demand for the sleepers, so we procured those by competitive tender, and they were shipped in from Germany. The main consultant I mentioned earlier is O'Connor Sutton Cronin. And the main works contract was an employer designed contract, public works. We moved quickly with it. We did an ODU notice published in July 22. Like we basically got the green light in about June 22, published the notice in July, issued tenders in September, and awarded the contract to CISC by December. And the scope of which was, as I mentioned earlier, mainly the earthworks, the bridges, the level crossings, track laying, and the civils for signalling. We also procured directly some bridges and culverts from Banagher, again through a competitive tender, and we free-issued some of those to CISC. And then we were well supported by our internal CIE group, Property Department of Property Surveyors, our solicitors, and our infrastructure manager, who assisted us with the supply of the rail materials, supply of specialist plant, and installation of the points and crossings on the route. So just a few images, a simple one maybe to start with. This is really post-site clearance and the beginning of kind of putting down the formation. And the image to the right showing the bottom ballast in place, earthworks complete, fencing. We've over 80 kilometers of fencing on the corridor. The majority of it is concrete post and wire, but we have other types as well. The bridge and structure highlights are probably a bit more meat in those. So a couple of the signature bridges really were the River Meg and River Deal. These are steel structures. They were lifted out, refurbished off-site, painted, reinstated. I have some images for that coming up. We had good collaboration between our own Irish Rail Bridge Gang and Mac Engineering, who were working for CISC. Our bridge gang specialise in the refurbishment of old structures, and it was a very good collaborative effort to bring some of these structures up to date to modern standards. Robertstown Viaduct. This was a replacement of a 3-span bridge with a 46-metre single span half through truss. Again, that was fabricated by Mac Engineering for CISC and delivered in 4 sections and assembled on site with a 750-ton crane. And then some new piled abutments, and I'll show you some images of these shortly. There's 36 smaller masonry structures repointed along the corridor, and all of our new structures are designed for modern freight axle loads. So this is a typical masonry arch bridge. This particular one, we call it OBF 15. Cleared of vegetation, repointed. We had 15 similar bridges that got this treatment, over bridges that is, and then I think approximately 14 under bridges, similar like masonry arch type structures. This here is a 3-span bridge over the River Deal. This is post its refurbishment, so just getting the last span into place. This was one of those collaborative efforts I mentioned earlier. One of our goals was to reuse, I suppose, from a sustainability perspective, to reuse bridges where we can and restore them, as opposed to maybe the tendencies to just renew and replace with concrete or whatever. This is again is the Deal, just getting ready to receive its rails, and here it is, post rail installation, and then another structure, not necessarily bridge related, just on a view into Roxborough, which is close to Limerick City. New retaining structure built on the boundary there. It's just quite tight on the corridor. So another key structure on the corridor was in Adare, the River Meg Bridge, a protected structure, and sitting over an SAC. We removed it for offsite refurbishment. That image on the right is September 23. It was lifted out. It was brought to a purpose-built compound. In the background there, you see a second crane, and there it was encapsulated, blast cleaned. The image in the bottom right shows you the blast cleaning, encapsulated scaffold, and repairs were carried out, and then it was painted in situ, and here we are lifting it back in about 12 months later. And the image on the right being the finished structure. Another key structure on the corridor, Robertstown Viaduct replacement. Again, sitting in over an SAC. This was replaced with, so what was a 3-span lattice truss. It was beyond economical repair, and we decided it needed to be replaced, and we said we'd replace it with a 1-span truss. We got planning consent for that back in 2019. And the scope, obviously a key feature was to protect the SAC. We needed to reinforce the existing causeway we used a combi grid solution there, 300 mil lifts. There's pilot abutments, concrete sheet piles. I'll show you some images now shortly. New steel and concrete deck, and then this was finished in June 24. So this is the deck being dismantled, and the image in the bottom right. And then top left, we've got the new bridge in fabrication. We've got the abutments with permanent sheet piling in place on the right. Bottom left, you see us just before the new concrete deck was poured. And then bottom right, we have it post deck pouring and rail installation. So track renewal, obviously a key feature of the project. We've 42 kilometers and some of continuously welded rail, over 66,000 concrete sleepers, 220,000 tons of new ballast, and we put a lot of effort into the reuse of spent ballast on the site. So we tried to minimize the disposal of material off site. So a lot of spent ballast was used as fill materials to build up embankments and walkways and so on. Our rails were delivered in 36-meter lengths, all delivered into Foynes port from Spain. And then our old materials, well, rail we saved and sold for scrap, and the sleepers were exported to timber for appropriate disposal. CISC employed a specialist subcontractor, Sticonfer, for the track laying, and we built a special test track out in Askeaton. This was to certify the plant. They developed a lot of bespoke plant tailored for this particular job and for the Irish gauge, and a particular installation methodology. So that we built a test track to sound that out and get the appropriate approvals in place before it was progressed at scale. Track laying, when it was at its peak, was up to 2 kilometers per week, was being achieved by Sticonfer. Some of the methodology employed there. So it was moved, the rail was moved by road to a rail head in Askeaton. Let me see if I have an image here. I don't. Lifted by gantry crane onto the back of a bespoke rail train onto these trailers here you see in the bottom left. And then these were distributed along the corridor. We had the sleepers were laid in advance by this sleeper spreader beam. So that was obviously we had to get the spacings absolutely perfect. And then the rail train would distribute the rail, was drawn off the train by this what we call Minzai spider, assisted by rail rollers, and then timbled into place and fastened down. And then that allowed the train to move on further and keep delivering. So it's sort of a rinse and repeat type solution developed by Staconfer. It worked very well. And then after the rail was in place, it was welded in situ with a mobile flash butt welder, and then dressing and tamping followed. And here we are. This is our tamper being craned into position. Though I suppose a lot maybe not familiar with the concept of rail tamping, but the tamper essentially packs the ballast under the rail sleepers and achieves the final kind of line and level for the track. And it had to be lifted in by crane because the line obviously isn't connected to the main line, and this vehicle would normally travel around the network by rail, but in this instance, obviously we had to deliver it by road. And this is just an active site of rail laying activities out in Adare at the time. So one of the few sections of double track on the corridor. Level crossings and signalling, like I mentioned at the start, we had 67 level crossings along the line when we started. 13 of those were former gated crossings, gatekeeper operated, and we were to upgrade those to CCTV type crossings. And then our user work crossings, we endeavored to try to close them where we could by agreement. So we managed to do this, some by some buyouts, some lands had changed hands and therefore the crossing was no longer justified. And then at a number of them, we built an alternative structure to take people either over or under the railway. These are agricultural type crossings, I should mention. So a couple of typical examples. Here we have this one we call XF24 Mans, which is just east of Adare. So this is a new overpass. With four similar structures built along the line. These were designed in-house by our structural design section, and we procured the concrete for them, and then we free issued the concrete to CISC to carry out the construction. On the right, we see XF47, we call it Hayes, and in this instance, just with the topography of the land, an underpass was the more appropriate solution. So this is a vehicular underpass to suit the farming activity at that location. That's now complete. That's a photo from during construction stage. And then at the bottom, a smaller underpass with two of these, a cattle underpass at XF44. CCTV level crossings, just to give you a feel for what they involve or what they look like. We've 13 of them along the corridor. You'll note really from the images the scale of the infrastructure. There's a lot besides the barriers and the flashing lights. There are equipment rooms and a lot of ducting and chambers in the vicinity of a level crossing. And then at a couple, we also have co-located mast for our GSMR telecoms network. So a lot of intricate detail, a lot of cooperation needed as well with the roads authority to map these out, and a lot of engagement with local stakeholders. But there were areas where we needed to acquire small pockets of land to site this various equipment, and this has been ably managed by our internal signalling department, working in collaboration with CISC, who are doing the groundworks. And then dotted along the line, we have 50 approx signal sites. Now they vary in size and scale, but say typically 10 meters long, 3 meters wide, They are set in advance of the railway level crossings. We're obviously having to feed them with ducting chambers. There's a ring of ducts and chambers at the particular level crossing, and then running out to the distant signals. The ducts were typically put in by CISC, and then the cabling is done by our internal department. I just left in the image there on the bottom right, just to show sometimes we were stuck for space, so we were having to work right up to our boundaries and then put in retaining units in order to create the footprint we need for our equipment rooms. And so this particular image here is at Adare. It's much more advanced than that now, as you can imagine, but it just gives you a flavour of the size of the intervention needed. At Foynes Station, we have a series of protected structures. The running shed roof there on the top left was the state of it when we started. So it was obviously in a very poor state of repair, certainly beyond economical repair. So we dismantled it carefully, and it has been replaced with a glulam timber beam solution, and we're providing a replica of the original structure. So that work is ongoing. The image to the bottom right is the finished, what's envisaged to be the finished article. Obviously a work in progress there post the dismantling of the roof there on the top right. And here it is, some recent photos. I think it's even come on a lot. It's actively being slated as we speak, and that slating is due to run through the rest of this month, and then by early May we should have the finished roof. In Foynes Station itself, we have a separate contract procured, just about to be awarded, for the refurbishment of the station buildings. This is to suit our staff accommodation associated with the operation of the freight service in the port. So that'll be, say, awarded in the coming weeks and on target for completion at the end of the year. Stakeholder engagement, obviously key facet of the project and of all, I suppose, successful projects. I'm conscious that we started the project from a standstill, so there wasn't as much time as you might like to warm up stakeholders. That said, we did our best. We set up a dedicated project website and email contact. We had regular engagement with public reps, the IFA, farmers, neighbouring properties. CISC would circulate a quarterly newsletter with general updates, and then we'd have specific letter drops when there was, again, like specific activity happening in somebody's vicinity. Look, there's always room for improvement on these things, but I think we did okay overall. So engineering challenges and its solutions. Look, I've touched off them as I talked through the photographs there to a degree, but the narrow corridor is a key issue. Only 5.5 meters wide in places. So the site was split into shorter sections, and what was coined as logistics centres were established. This to feed the site really with key materials. There was a lot of off-site fabrication, as I've kind of referred to previously, and then just-in-time deliveries so that we didn't clog ourselves up. So we were able to have a stockpile of ballast. CISC brought in a lot of ballast and stockpiled it at strategic locations along the corridor. Sleepers were able to be supplied, but they were all in Foynes Port along with the rail, and then were distributed along the corridor to suit the works. The work at Robertstown was particularly challenging with tidal river and the environmental constraints. Now, we had tried with the design to avoid in-river works. The single span structure was conceived obviously to avoid the in-river works, which was very helpful. And look, we got there in the end, but it was a particularly challenging site. Then, and I'll come to this a bit further, we had coordination which wasn't a live road scheme when we started the project, but quickly became a live road scheme for the Adare bypass that we then also ended up playing a key role in. One of the noteworthy points, I would say, is that we were able to leverage, I would say, significant in-house experience and expertise, with then complementing that with market capacity. So like we have a lot of know-how in here. What we don't have is the scale to deploy it across the whole network or multiple projects at the same time. But through sort of fostering collaboration with not just the consultant and the contractor, but with all of our other stakeholders, we were able to deliver, I think, an excellent product. And by that I mean the local authority, the Shannon Foynes Port Company, the Commission for Railway Regulation. Like there was a lot of and local reps, local residents groups. So there was a lot of collaboration along the job, which really was the key to its success. We did some early diversion of utilities, not as much as we would have liked to, just again because we started so fast. And then another thing that we did on the job, and we will certainly try to do earlier in the future, is the installation of a construction fibre, we call it. So we've a telecoms fibre running along the railway network all across the country, and it is at risk of damage depending on where it's located. Here we put in a new route set back from the railway line of the key works in a well kind of flagged location to protect it. Again, we would have liked to have done that ahead of the commencement of the main works, but instead it was just done as an early activity. In the future, we'll endeavour to do it as an enabling job. So the benefits, look, it delivers a missing link for the EU Trans-European Core Network, which is one of the key goals of the project. It enables access by rail to Foynes Port, which supports its role and its goals to be an international transport gateway and to grow itself as an international transport gateway. It'll lead to an economic boost for the Midwest and the Shannon Foynes Port area, we believe. It obviously provides a robust, resilient rail freight network, the beginning of a network, and which will provide an alternative to road freight, and in many ways complementary to road freight. Like there's still that first mile, last mile piece. It's always a joint effort to make freight work. And the reopened line will be a strong platform for a future passenger service in due course, and integration with other Midwest projects that are in the pipeline or on the horizon. Now, I'm going to move on. I'm conscious of time. I'm not doing too badly. I mentioned at the agenda that there was the Adare bypass. So this is a project that's been in gestation for many years, but suddenly came to life with the injection of funding. And we were asked in late 23, I think it was, would we assist with the delivery of 3 road overbridges for the road scheme. So the bridges that were to go over the railway, would we deliver them for Limerick, which we did. Approximately 13 million euro. We delivered them ahead of time and budget, and I think helped with the fast tracking of the Adare bypass scheme. I'll give you a little bit more insight into that. 2 of those structures, just from the graphic there, I mean, one is east of Adare, one is west of Adare. They're the ones obviously critical to the Adare bypass. A third structure is out near Askeaton. Less critical, but the view was let's deal with all of the rail interfaces on the road scheme in one go. And so that's what we did. Our scope was to deliver 3 overbridges, all of same span, 15.2 meter span, ranging in width some 32 meters with the one out in Askeaton, compared to approximately 80 meters for the 2 in there near Adare. There are all similar details for all of the bridges employed. Y beams supplied by Banagher, reinforced earth retaining panels, and H4A parapets and H4B as well. And then the other elements in our scope were the RC deck, the waterproofing, vehicle restraint system, fencing, drainage, and embankment construction. And we weren't finishing these like to full handover. We were to finish them to a point where they could be handed over to the roads contractor and used as haul roads. That was our brief. The image on the right showing a not quite completed but progressed structure. So an unusual, I suppose, organizational structure, but we made it work. And again, collaboration was the key. So the scheme was managed by Limerick in partnership with the Department of Transport and TII. We were to procure the bridges, again, with close cooperation from Limerick. Jacobs were the civil structural designers for Limerick and PSDP. We procured the precast concrete. We have a panel, a pre-qualified panel of suppliers for precast concrete, so we were able to move fairly quickly. And Banagher won that competition. For the bridge beams, we procured O'Connor and Cronin were acting for us as ER and RE, and then John Craddock Limited won the contract to build the 3 bridges. Here we are with them under construction. So we managed the procurement construction stage and interfaces with the rail project. Obviously, one of the reasons that Limerick came to us is because we would have been best placed to manage the interface with the ongoing railway project. We had our main contractor, CISC, carry out the preparatory works within the railway corridor, just to not blur any lines of responsibility and PSCS duties, just manage that interface risk. Our input to the delivery strategy when we were first engaged by Limerick was to say, look, let's get, time is of the essence. So let's get site access and compounds in place early, and Limerick were in a position to do that with an enabling works contract. And then our another key plank of it was that we said we should procure the precast concrete early and have that in fabrication and ready to be free issued to the contractor when he was appointed, and that worked out very well. So we placed the order for the concrete in May. We awarded the main contract in August, and it wasn't long after the main contractor mobilised that we were able to feed him with precast concrete. The Adare bypass main contractor then commenced in January, at which point we were in making good progress with the construction of our bridges, and then we handed them over in July and September respectively last year. The third bridge, being less time critical, was handed over in October. And that's them, not to say finished as far as our remit was concerned, and suitable to be used as haul roads. Now, I just think I'm okay time-wise, but yeah, a little bit spare. I'll just give you the one last piece here, which is on the Ryder Cup 2027 rail transport plan. So this is another project that came at us while we were doing the freight line project, and the remit was to design and build a station facility in Adare for the Ryder Cup, which is due to take place in Adare in 2027, September 2027 specifically. We did some optioneering and some consideration of solutions, and we landed on a single temporary platform. We issued tenders for construction on that back in December, and the contract was just awarded 2 weeks ago. Contract was due to mobilise at the beginning of May. So the project management for that is from my team. Again, we're supported by O'Connor and Cronin. We did maybe see this potentially coming, so that the track and signalling design through Adare doesn't need to be changed whatsoever to accommodate the platform. So that was beneficial. And the plan is to run. It's still a work in progress, but in principle, is to run a train service to and from Adare from Limerick Junction for the week of the event. So just to give people their bearings. So Limerick Junction obviously is well served by trains from Dublin, Cork, Waterford, Tralee, Killarney, all of which are kind of mooted to be accommodating Ryder Cup attendees, in various hotels. So people get themselves to Limerick Junction, and they transfer onto a shuttle train, which will take them into Adare in approximately 45 minutes. And to give people bearings for Adare, what we've got here, this is an image now taken during the construction stage. So in the foreground here, we've got the River Meg and the underbridge. We have a level crossing, XF35. To the left there, we have the former Adare Station House, which we actually sold maybe 10 or 12 years ago, but we've now reacquired. The flat area to the right is where we've now built our equipment room to operate the level crossing and the passing loop. The connections are now in for that second track, so it will be a fully functioning passing loop in Adare, and the platform will be built in the background there to the left, which is on the village side of the line, and allows, I suppose, convenient access in and out of Adare village. So just to talk you through a bit more detail on that. So the image on the top left is effectively our concept solution, single platform. We've got a queuing area will be prepared, this as indicated there in the bottom right. The old station building will be, minor works through it. We don't intend that passengers will be passing through that building, but it will accommodate our own staff during the week of the event. And the image to the top right there, you see that a lot of site clearance had taken place late last year, and that's the area where the platform is going to be built. And then to the left, bottom left there is really, again, concept stage solution for a temporary platform. So it's temporary in nature. I don't think it'll be very apparent to those using it. It's going to be designed, or it is being designed to be equivalent to any passenger station platform, so compliant with all of our usual rules and guidelines, and persons with reduced mobility, etc. So whether our view is whether it's in use for a day, a week, or forever, it needs to fully comply with all of our standards. And that is everything I've got, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, David, for that very interesting and insightful presentation on the reopening of the Foynes freight line, as well as the other ancillary projects that you mentioned in your presentation that Irish Rail were involved in the Limerick and Adare area.